Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ray Flossin, Executive Director of the Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence, and welcome to today's webinar on analytics-based enterprise performance management. It's my great pleasure to be joined today by today's speaker, Gary Cokins, an expert in this field, well written, and often a speaker on this topic. So welcome to our session today, Gary. For those of you who aren't familiar with PACE, we're the Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence. We're a group of professionals dedicated to helping organizations make better, more informed decisions through the use of analytics. If you want to become a member of PACE, it's free and you'll get access to all of our wonderful resources. I encourage you to go to our website, profitability-analytics.org, and learn more about them. Please hold your questions to the end. We will have some time to answer those and enter your questions in the chat feature. And having said that, over to you, Gary.
Hello, a little bit about myself. Who am I? Gary Cokins. I received my industrial engineering bachelor's degree from Cornell University in 1971, my MBA from Northwestern Kellogg in 1974. My employment, I began my first several years in manufacturing with a large conglomerate FMC Link Belt, then many years in consulting, 7 years with Deloitte, 5 years with KPMG, 5 years with Electronic Data System that's now part of Hewlett Packard. And then for 16 years, I was with SAS, SAS. I'm like, what is SAS? It's actually the world's largest privately owned software vendor that specializes in data science. There's a reason those books are there. I believe that careers have a lot more to do with luck and circumstances than being smart and competent. I had a couple of lucky breaks, and one of them in particular was in 1988 when KPMG struck an exclusive contract with Harvard Business School professor Robert S. Kaplan, and many you'll recognize his name from the balanced scorecard, which we will talk about. But he did the pioneering work in activity-based costing. I got recruited from Deloitte to KPMG. I was trained by Kaplan. I implemented it for many projects in the first couple of years. I wrote a book. It led to more books. Incidentally, I am not pushing my books. Don't criticize me or give me a thumbs down. You do not need to purchase the books, but if you go to wiley.com, chapter 1 is a free download. Let's look at the learning objectives. At the end of the webinar, participants should be able to view and apply enterprise and corporate performance management as an integrated management system that connects strategy, operations, analytics, and decision-making, rather than as a standalone process. Explain and apply how business analytics extends traditional business intelligence and assess where big data adds value to managerial decision-making. 3, identify, differentiate, and design KPIs within a balanced scorecard and operational performance indicators with management dashboards. And finally, to recognize and address EPM, CPM implementation barriers, including behavioral resistance to change and accountability concerns, and apply practical strategies to overcome. So let's go. Who will benefit from this presentation? Professionals who have previously struggled at promoting financial planning and analysis, enterprise performance management, and integrating business analytics into their decision support systems. Professionals who intend to champion any or all EPM and business analytic improvement techniques, and they need a compelling call to action. And the reason I have champion in quotation marks is it's been my observation that although it would be nice if the senior executives would advocate new ideas and concepts in innovation, often they are preoccupied with firefighting and short-term priorities. So it's typically managers 1, 2, 3 levels down in the org chart who ask themselves, how long do I want our organization to continue to perpetuate using stale or arcane or out-of-date methods? And they're the ones that'll do a proof of concept project, or iteration, and demonstrate to their coworkers and the executives above them, this is the way to go. So if you're several levels down, wherever you are, this presentation is for you. So now there is confusion and lack of consensus. What is this enterprise performance manager? Is it human resources? If you just do an internet search on just the two words performance management, most of the hits will all be about personnel and the human relation functions, employee appraisals. It's much broader. Is it about scorecards, dashboards, key performance indicators? Yes, but it's a subset. Is it about strategy allocation and resource allocation? Yes, that's a subset. And finally, is it about process, productivity, and quality improvement? Yes, but those three are typically referred to as business process management, BPM. That's the world of lean management, Six Sigma quality, and so forth. Again, it's a subset. Or is it all the above and even more? And the good news is this: enterprise performance management is not typically something that's brand new to all of you. You've read articles about it. The problem is when organizations do implement EPM, they implement them in isolation. There's many methods. So you've got profitability and costing people in one part of the building. You've got strategy management in another part of the building. You've got process improvement in another part of the building. You get a lot more synergy and power when you seamlessly integrate all of these methods like gears in a machine, and even more power when you embed analytics of all flavors into each of the methods. So, because you will get these slides, there's the definition that I just basically described to you. So, let's talk about business analytics as a start. You know, my message is work backwards with the end in mind. I could have put in a definition here from Wikipedia about analytics, but regardless how analytics should be defined, there should be no argument. What is the purpose of analytics? Pretty straightforward. Better decisions, better actions. Analytics goals should be to gain insights and foresight and solve problems to make better and quicker decisions with more accurate and fact-based data and to take actions. I sort of lied. I wouldn't give you a definition. That paragraph's a pretty good definition. So let's look at the continuum of analytics. When we look backwards, I call it the rear view mirror. We start with descriptive analytics, pie charts, histograms. Then we move to diagnostics. Notice there's a black dot there, in that exponential curve. That's an outlier. So you want to drill down and like, well, why is that out there? Then when we go through what I call the windshield, the predictive view, we start with predictive analytics. And actually, you may have noticed one of the books I co-authored was Predictive Business Analytics. When I co-authored, I went, well, with Larry Maisel, he was a partner at KPMG. I said, well, this is Mount Everest. This is as high as you can go. But in the last few years, the more higher one is prescriptive analytics. Think of it as optimization. So what's caused interest in EPM? I'm going to quickly go through these 8 reasons, then I'm going to drill down into 4 of them the rest of the presentation. The first one is executive frustration with strategy failure. Most executives are quite good at formulating their strategy. Their frustration is failure to successfully implement the strategy. And there's some good empirical evidence of this. There's an executive recruiting firm monitors the involuntary turnover of CEOs in North America, the firing of CEOs. It's increasing every year. And I believe it's because board of directors post Enron now don't treat their board member role ceremoniously. If the CEO is not implementing the strategy, they're going to get rid of them. A good example, Carly Fiorini at Hewlett Packard. Next, increased accountability. Today, there is no place to hide. Managers and employee teams will be measured. They will be monitored. It doesn't necessarily mean their jobs are at risk, but it could adversely impact their salary increases and job promotions. 3, more rapid decision making. Unlike a few months ago or years ago when you could test and learn and have meetings in conference rooms, today people are on the phone. Go or no go. Yes or no. They have to make a decision in real time. 4, mistrust of the managerial accounting system for transparency and accuracy. The reality is most managers do not trust the management accounting system. Why? The bane of overhead cost allocations being spread like butter across bread. We'll talk about that. 5, poor customer value management. The reality is customers and the actions with customers are the source of financial wealth creation for shareholders and owners. We need to connect the two and have information about it. Unfortunately, Most CFOs do not measure customer profitability. They stop halfway down the income statement P&L at product or service line gross profit margin. They don't include distribution channel expenses, marketing expenses, selling expenses. I'll show how that can be done. Six, contentious budgeting, poor resource capacity. My belief is the annual budgeting process is broken. It's out of date a couple of months as soon as you publish it, and a whole bunch of other reasons. So my recommendation is stop budgeting. Well, there, I probably caught a lot of your attention. But that begs the question, what was the purpose of a budget in the first place? And can we replicate that purpose using these EPM methods? Next, seven, dysfunctional supply chain management. Now, this won't apply to those of you that are in the retail where your company is serving end consumers, but those of you that are in the business to business supply chains, the issue here is most supply chain, if you will, suppliers view their customer as the enemy. It's an adversarial relationship. If we can negotiate lower prices with our supplier and we have to put them out of business, so what? We'll get another supplier. That behavior has to stop. It needs to be a marriage. Supply chains are competing with other supply chains for share of wallet and purse. And finally, eight, unfulfilled return on investment promises from large IT systems, lack of integration. The issue here is if you ask an IT director after they've gone through the long journey of, let's say, implementing an ERM, or excuse me, a ERP system, enterprise resource planning, you ask them, how well do you think the ROI has met or exceeded what the ERP salesman sold you on many months ago? They'll be hard pressed to say, no, I'm not sure. We put in a lot of work. I don't see the payback. That does not mean you shouldn't implement the ERP system. You need to. But what ERP systems do is they produce a lot of data, but not necessarily information. You've got to convert the data into information, and the EPM systems provide for that, and they create the ROI like growing seeds from the ground. So we're at our first polling question. Which is not one of the eight forces causing interest in CPM? Executive frustration with strategy failure, the use of mobile phones and tablets, poor customer value management, contentious budgeting, poor resource capacity planning. I'll wait a short while till you've all submitted. Those of you looking for CPE hours, you must answer.
I'll give you just a little more time, but please answer quickly so we can move on with the presentation.
Yeah, let me know, Ray, when I can continue.
I'll push out the results when it looks like everyone's responded.
We need to go more quickly. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving ahead here. Ooh.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, after the poll, my spacebar doesn't work. So, all right, let me now go into four of the eight forces in more detail. That first one was failure by executives to execute their well-formulated strategy. So we need to talk about the balanced scorecard. Strategy map basically should go into a balanced scorecard. Many organizations, they claim they've got a balanced scorecard. Ask me, you have a strategy map? No. I believe the strategy map is 10 times more important than the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is just a feedback mechanism. But above these two is something arguably more important. It's the vision and mission statement. That must come from the executive team. That's their job. That needs to answer the question, where do we want to go? But what a strategy map and its balanced scorecards answer is a different question. How will we get there? What are the projects or initiatives to accomplish what are called strategic objectives? And I'll give you example in right now. Now, the reason Kaplan and Norton created this, two reasons. One, they recognized that executives were overreacting to financial results reported at the end of the period. They said you need to basically shift your attention to non-financial metrics reported during the period so you can react to them. The second reason is They realize that most employee teams and managers don't understand the strategy. I mean, for example, if I went into your organization and randomly interviewed 10 employees in the hallway and said, quick, 5 minutes, can you articulate your executive team strategy? How many of them could do it? Maybe none. So this solves that problem. Now, the strategy map, the way they designed it is there are these four perspectives, and within the four perspectives are two, three, or four of what are called strategic objectives. Okay. And when we start at the bottom, the learning and growth and innovation, if the employees are accomplishing those objectives, they'll contribute further up to the internal process improvement objectives. If they're accomplishing those, they'll contribute further up to the customer loyalty, retention objectives, and then it'll result in the financial strategic objectives at the top. So if we go from the bottom to the top, a learning environment will stimulate process excellence. That'll lead to customer intimacy, retention, loyalty. That creates the financial value. A way to think about the balanced scorecard is imagine if every employee, every single day, could answer this one question: how am I doing on what is important? How am I doing on what is important? Strategy Map and its balanced scorecard provides this answer. The overriding purpose of a strategy map and its balanced scorecard system to make mission and strategy everyone's job. It's almost like making owners in the employees. So we're at our next polling question. Which is not one of the four perspectives in a strategy map and its companion balanced scorecard? Financial perspective, customer perspective, supplier perspective, process perspective.
I think there's one more. Please submit your response promptly so we can move on.
All right. Quick answers. Now let's move on to number 4 of the 8 causes of interest in EPM. Mistrust of the managerial accounting system and its flawed cost allocations, misleading cost reporting of outputs, products, standard service lines, channels, customers, and outcomes. So this is where we have to talk about activity-based costing. And here's a simple way that I explain ABC. Imagine you go to a restaurant with 3 other friends. The other 3 order the most expensive item on the menu. You order only a little salad. At the end of the meal, when the waiter or waitress brings the bill, the other 3 say, "Hey, let's split this check evenly." How do you feel? Not fair, not equitable. Well, that's how products and standard service lines also feel when the accountant takes this large amount of indirect expense, commonly called overhead, and they allocate it to the products or service lines using cost allocation factors like number of labor hours in manufacturing or headcount numbers by department or sales revenue amount, or square feet, square meter. None of those cost allocation factors reflect the true consumption that those diverse products and service lines consume of the end-to-end business processes and the work activities that belong to those processes, which in turn draw on the expenses, salary, supply, travel, and so forth. So a simple way to explain ABC is as if the waiter or waitress brings 4 individual checks. You only pay for what you consume. Otherwise, you'd be subsidizing those other 3 who ordered the expensive items. Now, the reason there's been interest in ABC over the last 30, 40, 50 years has to do with this diagram. It has the 3 universal components of any organization's expense and cost structure. At the bottom, the direct or the recurring labor, the direct material in the middle, and then the indirect expense overhead at the top. You notice what's happening over time is the indirect expense overhead is displacing the direct. When you ask people why that is, well, they'll speculate, well, maybe it's automation or robots or kiosks or something. That is secondary. The primary reason the indirect is displacing the direct, is all organizations over time have had an increased proliferation of different types of products or service lines. Manufacturers, more colors, more sizes, more ranges, banks, more types of depository accounts, insurance companies, more types of policies. The point is this: whenever you increase the diversity and variation of the outputs, it just produces complexity. And when you have more complexity, you need more and more indirect expense to manage that complexity. So way back 30, 40, 50 years, when the company had to say homogeneous products or services, most of the expenses were direct. So it was a thin veneer of indirect. You could butter spread it, bring in error, but most of the accuracy would come from the direct. Now look to the right. That is not the case today. Indirect can sometimes be 50, 60% compared to the direct. Now, the problem actually begins with the first diagram, first box to the left, the chart of accounts view. Most managers on the planet Earth recognize this monthly responsibility cost statement, salary, equipment, travel, and so forth. But as I say at the bottom, when managers get this kind of report, they are either happy or sad, but they're rarely any smarter. What ABC does, it makes them smarter. Because notice now in the middle box, what we've done is we've converted the exact same $914,500 into a different structure. It's not structured. The general ledger chart of accounts is poorly, or it's not structured for decision analysis. The middle one, the structure is better. Key scan claims, analyze claims. Notice I'm using the back office of insurance company. It's a factory too. And then we reassign each of the activities into the products or service lines or customers, just like the waiter or waitress in the restaurant, based on how much it consumes. And when you ask people really, where do expenses begin? Most of them say, well, I certainly start on the left with the salary and so forth. No, switch it 180 degrees. The expenses actually are initiated at the far right. The products, service lines, customers place demands on the workload in the middle. The workload then draws on the expenses to the left, and then the costs measure the effect in the other direction. So demands on work flow right to left, costs flow left to right. It's modeling, basically. It's not T accounts and journal entries, it's modeling. Now I'm going to rotate that previous diagram 90 degrees and demonstrate that in reality, for a good, effective ABC system, it needs to be a multiple stage assignment network. Now, I want to warn you, the next slide is going to be complicated, but the one that follows it, I will be sharing a link to a Institute of Management Accountants paper that I wrote. It's 30 pages. It will describe all of these slides. So here it is. It's got the three universal components of any organization's expense and cost structure. The expenses are at the top, salary, material, phone. The work activities are in the middle, and then they pile up into what are called the final cost objects. All of those arrows, think of them as thin straws or wide pipes where the diameter reflects the amount of money flowing through, okay? So if you had fictitiously, let's say, $50 million of expenses in January resources, it'll be the exact $50 million of work activities, and that 50 million will pile up into the bottom two right boxes, customers and business sustaining in the final cost objects. Think of the final cost objects like the predator food chain. Large mammals eat small mammals, eat plants. So it becomes sort of cumulative. Again, I've got that little grid at the right. If you, in your mind, reverse all the arrows the opposite direction. That's what's happening every minute, hour, day, week, month, year. The customers and the products are placing demands on the workload's drawing on the expenses, the costs measure the effect in the other direction. Notice that there's two red boxes near the right in the work activity that are going directly to the customers. Those would be expenses like marketing, selling, channel, distribution. Again, the point is costing is modeling, not T accounts and journal entries. Now, I mentioned to you, since I went through that quickly, you're like, oh, what did he talk? Well, if you go to this link and slide number, whatever, 28, It will take you to the Institute of Management Accounting's website. You'll see a statement of management accounting I authored. It'll explain ABC pretty well. What's more importantly is what do you see when there's a result from ABC? And what you're looking here is a graph from a real company. Now, the way the graph works, the vertical axis is the net revenues minus the properly traced and calculated ABC costs. The horizontal axis is the cumulative buildup of profit, rank ordered, starting with the most profitable product, the second most profitable product, and so on and so forth. The data point at the very far right, 2 million, will always reconcile with the income statement. So in this company with 30 in sales, 20 in expenses, net out at 2. There is always organization shock when companies see this graph. Its nickname is the whale curve because no, look, it looks like a humpback whale. Because in this company, look what it said. It said, look, you made roughly $8 million of unrealized profit on three-fourths of your most profitable products. You lost 6 million on the remainder to net out at 2. They can't believe it because their belief system is it's the blue line. And that's because all of that butter spreading of overhead on broad averages was crushing or suppressing any accuracy. And the multi-stage cost assignment network with ABC and all its driver quantities basically distinguishes and detects all that diversity and creates the top line. So the top line is truth, the blue line is false, you know. And if you remember anything, remember it's fact-based data. Remember this, in the absence of facts, anybody's opinion is a good one. In the absence of facts, anybody's opinion is a good one. But usually the biggest opinion wins, which is the opinion of the boss or the boss of the boss. So to the degree they're making decisions on intuition or gut feel or flawed and misleading information like the blue line, your organization is at risk. All right, let's move on to the fifth of the eight, the strategy map, the shift from being product, oh, no, customer profitability, the shift from being product centric to customer centric. The value of a company is a function of the value from its customers. The only value a company will ever create is the value that comes from its customers, the current ones and the new ones acquired in the future. To remain competitive, one must determine how to keep customers longer, grow them into bigger customers, make them more profitable, serve them more efficiently, and acquire relatively more profitable customers like your existing profitable customers. But we've got a couple of problems. And one of them is, as I mentioned, CFOs and accountants are not measuring customer profitability. They're stopping halfway down the income statement at the product and gross profit and service line margin mix. So to describe visually what I'm saying is if this is the entire rectangle is your expenses, the accountants are only measuring for the shaded area. They're not including distribution, selling, marketing, and general and accounting expenses. We need to basically go there. So why do customer-related costs matter? Well, as differentiation from product or service line advantages is reduced or neutralized, the customer relationship grows in importance. Thus, this cost to serve component of each customer's profit contribution requires being measured and having visibility. And ABC measures how resource expenses are uniquely consumed by each diverse customer. We have a second problem, angel customers and demon customers. I love the subtitle of this book, Discover Which Type of Customer is Which and Turbocharge Your Stock Price. And when I mentioned earlier that customers are the source of value wealth creation for shareholders. Well, every company has high and low maintenance customers, examples of high maintenance customers. They're always changing the delivery schedule dates. They're always demanding special, not standard product. They're always returning goods, always calling help desk. The low maintenance customers, the angels, we like them. They do none of the above. So the message here is sales volume is not equivalent or representative of the profit from a customer. Incidentally, this book was authored by two marketing faculty from Columbia University. There's not much mention of accounting in it, but I like just using the book cover to get my point across. So profitable and unprofitable customers are distinguished in how they place demands. Let's review again the less profitable customers. Small order quantities, special products being ordered, heavy price discounting, unpredictable demands, always changing delivery times, high technical support. They're slow pay. The angels, we love them. The more profitable, large order sizes, only order standard products, little discounting, maybe no price discounting, predictable demands, delivery times actually standard, low technical support, maybe no technical support, they pay on time. ABC can measure that. Now, this is a decomposition of that multi-stage cost assignment network. It's also in that 30-page IMA document. But I just want to show you as we flow from left to right, as the activity drivers come in, what's really happening is the profit is erosion is declining. And once we do this, we can then produce a profit and loss statement for each individual customer. So here's a fictitious example of a P&L by a customer. And you notice to the right, at the 30% for the product and service line, that's the composite average gross profit margin. But between the 30 and the 8 profit at the bottom, 22 more points of profitability are eroded, lost, nothing to do with the products in the standard service lines, all with channel marketing and selling expenses. So if we calculate these two broad swaths for every customer, we can put them on a grid that looks like this. The vertical axis is the product and standard service line mix gross profit margin. The horizontal axis is that cost to serve, low maintenance, low on the left, high on the right. Now things become very obvious. And each circle intersection is a customer. Things become obvious. The most unprofitable customers are in the bottom right because they're difficult and costly to serve, and they're buying low profit margin mix from you. The most profitable customers are in the upper left because they're buying high profit margin mix from you, and they're easy to serve. And now the name of the game is move the dots from the bottom right to the upper left. And that would be a whole other webinar, Rafe, on customer profitability and the actions you could take. But I'll just give you one example, fee-based charges. Look, the banks charge individual fees for different types of accounts. Airlines charge different fees for baggage, or if you want to move from a middle seat to an aisle seat. So if there are these extra services, charge them for it. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, Gary, you're starting to persuade me that we should do ABC at our organization, or you're a consultant. And if you are a consultant, please contact me. What I enjoy doing at this age 76, feel like 46, is training consultants how to implement these methods for their clients. Consultants, contact me. But the others, you're saying, oh, but it'd be too complicated. There'd be 500 activities in it. It would require having to extract all the data from it on and on. And every employee would have to fill out a timesheet, and they don't want to fill out daily. Those are all misconceptions. But Pete, that's what people believe in. Several years ago, actually a couple of decades ago, I began using an implementation method that resolves that problem and resolves the size of the ABC system to be good enough. It starts with bringing 5 or 6 cross-functional employees into a conference room, constructing a very high-level ABC model very quickly, not intended to be accurate or even useful. Okay. Then, with all the drivers, then the morning of the next day, bring in the other line managers and maybe some of the executives, maybe even some of the board members, show them what was constructed. The light bulbs go on with everybody, and it's very engaging because it's your own company. And so the light bulbs go on. The other department heads say, "Oh, that's how we get rid of that butter spreading. Oh, that's how we could do benchmarking with apples and apples, not apples and Oreos." They get it. Then what we do is we take a week or two to start basically improving the size of the model, replacing, in model 0, it's all based on percentage estimates, 30, 30, 40, 10, 10, 80. In any allocation, everything normalizes to 100%. So we start with percentages, but then we can start replacing it with quantities that are extracted from our operational system. Then we'll do another iteration. Here's the point. In 2 to 3 weeks, permanent, repeatable ABC production system, not 6 months, and it's understandable. Make your mistakes early and often, not later when the system is too hard to change. I have to accuse some of the consultants. They want to take 6 months to put in a long, big system because they want those billable hours. They don't need to. And when they make it that big and then they show it to everyone, then the arguments take place and it's too difficult to go back and change some of the source data. So let's move on to the sixth of the eight problems, contentious budgeting. Here's the problem. The budget is typically a fiscal exercise done by the accountants that is, one, it's disconnected from the executive team strategy. Two, it's typically not based on future driver volumes. And now I'm going to show you how we can basically do driver-based budgeting with using the EPM methods as the source. Now, let me see. This is not meant to be a polling question. How many of these would you resonate with about how you do budgeting in your organization? Our budgeting exercise is invasive and time consuming with few benefits. It takes 6 months from start to end. We begin in July, we finish finally in December. It requires two or more executive tweaks at the end. The executives don't like the first draft, change some of the numbers. It's obsolete in a couple of months due to events and reorganizations anyway, so it's out of date by you get to April. It starves the departments with truly valid needs. So maybe a department's going to have an increased workload because of a process shift. You don't give them enough additional employees. It caves into the loudest voice and political muscle. That's these bald gray hairs like me, the veterans. They know how to do gaming the system. It rewards the veteran sandbaggers. That's the same ones. They're experts at padding the budget, if you will, what they submit. It incorporates last year's inefficiencies in this year's budget. So in the current year that we just ended, process was really bad. We don't even fix it. It winds up being duplicated in the next future budget. And finally, it's overstated from prior years, use it or lose it spending. The issue there is when managers are, let's say, 3 to 4 months away from on a glide path to the fiscal year, and they see they've not spent all of the money, they're not on the path to spend all the money that was approved and allotted for them, what do they start doing? They start spending needlessly, foolishly. Why? Because they know that their budget is going to be pegged to how much they spent this year. It's like a spreadsheet. Let me see if I can describe how you do budgeting in your organization. I got to move fast here. You give every manager a spreadsheet January to December for their department with all the ledger accounts. They fill it in January to December. Someone in the accounting department consolidates the spreadsheet. Then you bring in a revenue forecast from the sales and marketing. You create the thing. You basically give it to the executives. They look at it, say, not enough profit, make some changes. You give the spreadsheets all back to the managers again. They lower some of their expenses. We give it back to the accounting department. They consolidate it back to the executives. That's a little bit better, but not good enough. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Come on. You almost want to ask the executives, what number did you want in the first place? So we don't have to go through all this spreadsheet manipulation. But that would give us their aspirations of what they want. We want to know what's actually possible. So let me describe how the EPM methods can basically produce driver-based budgeting. Think of the amount of spending for the next future period as a result of two river streams. The upper river stream is the recurring, repeatable expenses, typically customer demand value. The bottom river stream is the non-recurring, non-repeatable expenses. It's going to come basically from projects. Let's talk about the upper river stream. The way we can move that is we calculate our ABC costing model backwards. We forecast the demand, volume, and activity drivers to solve backwards. Notice on the left side, that's that historical strategic view profit margins. But we pick up a bonus when we do the historical view, unit level consumption rates, cost per material move, cost per blood test in a hospital. Incidentally, service organizations, healthcare, if you're in healthcare, contact me. Rafe and I have actually co-authored an article on measuring patient profitability. So then once we've got those unit level consumption rates, we can calculate backwards. And I think I refer to this as my industrial engineering 101 freshman year, second semester, 1967. Here's the equation. Customer demand, volume, and mix times those unit level cost consumption rates equals the capacity required, meaning the number and type of employees and their associated wages and salary and purchases with suppliers. So that's the upper river stream. Now let's talk about the projects. The enterprise risk management community uses this grid. It's very popular. Each of the vertical axis, well, each of the circles is a potential risk event that could happen in the future. A tsunami or a tornado or a shutdown, breakdown of a data center. The vertical axis is how severe the impact would be. The horizontal axis is the probability of that event occurring. Now, you can't spend money on all, if you will, possible events, but the ones that are in the blue, we want to mitigate that risk and spend money. So now I've decomposed the upper river stream and the lower river stream. The upper river stream is the shaded boxes. I'm not going to go through all this in detail, but you can see the management accounting is coming in. There's our consumption rates. From the left, we've got the forecast drivers and volumes. We multiply the two, we get that capacity pan, number of labor hours, pounds, kilograms, number of employees, and then we monetize it, put it in whatever the currency is. That gives us the operational budget. Now look at the bottom left, the other three, capital budget, strategy budget, risk budget. They're going to come from the ones I just mentioned. I didn't mention capital budgets. You're all familiar with capital budgets. When we bring the four of those together, that is a much more accurate, logical way of knowing what the future expense is going to be. But we still have a problem. Notice to the right, there's a diamond there, like a baseball diamond that says, is it good? And when we even give this realistic spending to the executives, they may say, not enough, more profit. Okay, well, the temptation to go back is, well, why don't we eliminate or postpone some of the capital projects? No, we already justified them in individual projects. Why don't we postpone or eliminate some of the strategy projects? No, then we're not going to implement the strategy. The CEO is going to get fired. Why don't we postpone or implement the risk budget? No, and then we expose ourselves. So the temptation is to do those, but the way to really get the cost down is unit level consumption rates, productivity improvement. In other words, do process improvement. I've lived in Detroit for many years. I can tell you the big three, when they negotiate with their supplier, the first tier suppliers like Lear Seating, it's based on the driver, basing on the model of the car out 4 or 5 years, and it's always a lower price. The second tier automotive suppliers are experts at productivity improvement to lower their price. But we still have to put our engineering hat on, because when we go into the future, if you will, we start almost all of our costs are either sunk or fixed. But when we go into the future, as we go out weeks, months, we can replace full-time employees with temporary contractors. We could lease assets rather than purchase them and have depreciation expenses. So we got to think about classifying the behavior of resource segment as sunk, fixed, step fixed, or variable. So we're at polling question number 3, which is not a reason the budgeting process is broken. 1, it is disconnected from the executive team strategy. It's insensitive to demand volume. The board of directors require an annual budget. It's out of date soon after it is published. Which of those 4 is not a reason the budgeting process is broken? Ooh. Hey, Rafe, am I still on?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, because when I'm hitting the submit button in the past, it didn't work, but let me know when they're done. All right, we're good. So, oh, I had to reboot my
No problem. So the responses
I
were,
had to right
got it.
click to get to my next slide. I'm there. So let's start winding up. How does all these methodologies fit together? This is a diagram that I created. I'll go another slide after this one, but the big purple box, that's your organization, that's your resources, your assets. Notice at the top, that's your customers. Notice at the top, the customer black line goes up to the right, down into the shareholders. That reinforces my message that customers are the source of value creation for wealth creation for shareholders and owners. Okay, think of this like a circulatory system, like your blood, in the veins in your heart system. Where's management accounting and analytics? I deliberately left it out because the output of management accounting and analytics is the input everywhere. It's perversely. Okay, so let's start at the customer satisfaction. Notice to the left, the executives will formulate their strategy based on needs of customer. That's where the strategy map and the balance scorecard fits in. Then they will communicate the strategy to the employees with the strategy map, the balance scorecard, KPIs, and so forth. That creates the scorecards and dashboards at the bottom. And then they become the feedback. Remember that question? If every employee could answer, how am I doing on what's important? They just wake up in the morning, turn on their screen. They've got 3 KPIs. Is the dial favorable or unfavorable to the dial? But if every employee can answer that question, then it becomes, how are we all doing on what's important? Okay, so that's strategy implementation. Now going up, CRM, targeting. What's that all about? When I went quickly through the customer profitability section, but really what marketing and salespeople are asking is, which type of customer is attractive to retain, to grow, to win back and acquire? Which types are not? And that's why they need to basically know the profiles of the differences between highly profitable and less profitable customers. Now we've got this counterclockwise circle. Notice the arrow coming in from the customer. Take the customer order, complete the order. Admit the hospital patient, heal the patient. And that's where then the most universal, substantial end-to-end business process is order fulfillment. Take the customer order, complete the order. And that's the world where then the enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, lean management, Six Sigma quality, and all of those fit in. I hope in your diagram that you're seeing these bubbles flowing through. This is what's happening every minute, hour, day, week, month, year. Okay? It's continuously going on. But here's the issue. If any of those veins is narrow, constricted, I call it, like the medical term, arteriosclerosis of the EPM system, that means the money doesn't all flow to the shareholders. Look, it leaks into the sewer. So 2 examples would be process inefficiencies, which we didn't fix, or we are still targeting and going after what are potentially going to be unprofitable customers. So think of this thing as really, this is a good vision of what you would like your system to be. Now, it's a tribute to the executives who have to basically prioritize projects. Where do we start? Well, if you don't understand the strategy, start with the strategy and balance score. If we don't know where we make or lose money or profit, start with ABC. But my message here, don't take 2 years to implement all of these EPM methods. Try to do a couple of them a month, or do one every couple of months using rapid prototyping techniques, fast iterations, so you can get the synergy of the full integration. Now, here's a frustration that I have. Why has the adoption rate for analytics EPM methods been so slow? What's taking so long? Well, there are 3 barriers, and I'll go into more depth for some of them. The first one can be technical barriers that are IT related, dirty data. So some of the source data when it was put in, had errors, or in the old days, key punch errors. Many of you remember those. Okay. But IT has a technology called ETL, extraction, transform, and load. It can clean that data. Another issue may be if you're multiple divisions, you've got different hardware. Hewlett Packard, IBM, Dell, IT can fix that. The next problem is the perception barriers of excess complexity and affordability. Again, when I mentioned ABC, many of you probably reared your heads and said, oh, it'll take 6 months to a year to implement. I showed you it can be done in 2 to 3 weeks. Same thing with strategy map and balance scorecard. If you're interested, especially the consultants, in knowing how to implement strategy map, balance scorecard in 1 week, I can describe my method. But the biggest barrier has got nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with systems or software. It's number three, it's organizational behavior barriers. And this starts with things like resistance to change. It's human nature. People like the status quo. They don't like, they don't, change basically is concern to them. Also, other barriers, fear of knowing the truth. Oh, I did an ABC, I'm going to do an ABC system. I don't want any of the other managers, the other departments to know what my expenses are. Fear of being measured, fear of being held accountable. Notice all of those have to do, if you will, with human nature, you know, and do not underestimate the importance of behavioral change management and overcoming resistance to change, getting buy-in, if you will, persuading people. The problem is many of us, including me in the beginning, we are all what I call Newtonians, like Isaac Newton, the physicist. To us and you, the world's a big machine. Give me the levers, the pulleys, the dials. What's needed is for you to be somewhat Darwinian, like Charles Darwin, the biologist. It's an organism, sense and respond, the organization. So you've got to figure out ways basically to improve. Finally, one, and I'm reluctant to say it, is weak leadership. Not every executive team's got the highest IQ. So if you don't have really good leaders, who have followers, but if you don't have good leaders, they think they're following, but no one's following them. So to conclude, before we get to Q&A, I'm showing a cover of this is what I call the complete vision of performance management. The book on the left is one of my books. And Wiley always asks an author, what do you want to have on the book cover? And I said, I want the gears. I want dirty, grimy gears. I want gears that are not meshed together. So think if you put those gears into your automobile engine, and maybe even threw some sand in there, what would your fuel efficiency be? Very low. Now look at the right picture, titanium gears, meshed together, spinning faster revolution per minute. Put that in your automobile engine. Now what's your fuel efficiency? Much higher. Now replace the metaphor of fuel efficiency in a car with rate of shareholder wealth increase. That's what all of the integration of these methods are. Make the revolutions per minute, RPM, the corporate performance and performance and the business analytic gears spin better, faster, cheaper. That's the process improvement. Safer, that's the strategy map balance scorecard. Or no, risk mitigation, smarter. So next steps, get educated. Thank you very much. Those of you who are attending this, you are getting educated, hopefully, and learn to get buy-in by persuading others. Rapid prototyping, start small, think big, go fast. That's my belief. I'm an 80-20 guy, ready, fire, aim. I don't have expertise in motivational theory, but I just know that it is important. Let me give you a quick example. Back to the profitability by customer. Some of the most advanced companies are changing the Salesforce commission structure from 100% sales by each customer to a blend like 60% sales, 40% customer. And that motivates the salesperson to alter the behavior in some way, get higher profit, changing the behavior of their customers in harmony with the cost structure of their own organization. Really, now we've connected the sales by customer with the Salesforce to shareholder wealth creation. I have links to three articles that I've written. That first one's only about a 5-minute read. The second one is about a 20-minute read. You could share that with your colleagues if you want them to kind of get a gist of what I talked about here. The third one is about ABC. So your success depends on how fast the right information intelligence gets to the right people. And Rafe, I'm turning it back to you. We have 5 minutes.
Yes, I got to watch too, Gary. So thanks for that great presentation, Gary. And we'll move on to the Q&A now. But before we do, I want to launch the end of the webinar poll. and please answer it before you leave. So we do have two questions. One is, how can AI be leveraged to reduce the need for structured data and formal systems of ABC? Can organizations with complicated and disjointed ERPs use AI to facilitate smarter and more accurate ABC without massive system overhauls?
I'm going to need to apologize. I'm reading as much as I can about AI and its application to different methods. I don't really have a good explanation yet. I'm like you, I'm asking the same questions. One example though would be AI could create an activity dictionary by industry. So if you're a company, let's say you're a bank or insurance company or whatever, and you want to build an ABC system, you could go to an AI and it'll create, let's say 30, 40, 50 activities. So you got a head start. That would be an example. So I'm sort of apologizing. I don't have a good answer, but keep investigating, keep doing internet searches on AI for finance.
Hey Gary, this is Steve. Can I jump in here a little bit?
Rafe?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Yes, yes, Steve Wofford. This is a good friend of mine, does ABC and banks. Go with Steve.
Yeah, Gary's headed right down the right alignment. There are just a ton of things that can help you, particularly jumpstart. When he was talking about doing the prototyping, to be able to go out and use a large language model or something like that to assist in developing quick activity dictionaries, understanding the linkage between your activity dictionary and your GL. There is just a ton of things that could be done there. Now, I'll just stop there, but the answer is yes. And that's just tools at your own fingertips.
Okay. Next question, Rafe.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Okay, and this is probably the last question we'll have time for. What is the most important lesson you have learned during your career?
Well, lesson implementing these methods, don't underestimate what I concluded, behavioral change management. You have really got to think like a psychologist, not like an accountant. Also, because I'm an industrial engineer, you need to basically think like an engineer. I always like to say I'm an engineer masquerading as an accountant. I've been in the accounting since age 27. I was a division controller in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with FMC Link. Then all of my career with Deloitte, KPMG has always been the accounting space. But the big lesson is how to overcome that resistance to change. And let me tell you, let's see, we're almost done here. The best way, and actually this is a message for executives, because the best executives and leaders don't have the best answers. The best executive leaders have the best questions. And this is what you need. There's too much volatility. There's too much complexity, too much of all of that, basically for you to know. You got to generate the interest. And that's a good technique for behavioral change management. Get people to feel a little uncomfortable. They don't know where they make money. They're not measuring the right things, and they'll be interested in the EPM methods. So, Rafe, I'm going to let you wrap it up.
Yep. Well, thank you, Gary. That was a very interesting presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot. And I just would like to remind everyone to keep an eye on our PACE channel on LinkedIn, where you'll learn about future webinars and all the other activities that are ongoing at PACE. Thank you for attending today, and we'll see you next time.